Today, we welcome to Global Citizenship Education Interview Series Neil Hawkes. Neil Hawkes is a popular TEDx speaker and an expert on ethical leadership at the United Nations Institute for Training and Research UNITAR. He has spoken at the United Nations in Geneva, and his approach, known as values-based leadership, has spread worldwide and is recognized by the G20 and the United Nations. Neil co-founded Living Values Education, the IVET Foundation, and the Global Alliance for Values-Based Education. He has authored several books, including From My Heart and The Inner Curriculum, and Neil holds a PhD from Oxford University. So Neil, very welcome to Global Citizenship Education Interview Series. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Emiliano, it's a great honor to be with you. I've been studying your work for some time, and you really are amazing. And thank you for all the work you're doing for global citizenship. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. And I've been also reading your line of work and publications in preparing for this interview. And all my guests here, international guests, would go through a first straightforward question. And the question is, how do you define global citizenship? And how does your work on values-based education align with this concept?
Yes, this question is a really key question. I've been passionate about global citizenship all my teaching career. I'm a teacher, basically, and I've been absolutely for global citizenship. My mission, actually, through my work has been to find connections for human beings so that they can respond from their essence. And I believe their essence, which I think is cooperation, collaboration, caring. We wouldn't have survived as a species had we not had those traits in us. My work in values-based education really goes back to the heart of global citizenship. But what is it? I think it's very simply put, thinking, feeling, and acting from the understanding that we are all of us, citizens of planet Earth. And thereby we have responsibility for the care of ourselves, others, and other sentient and other beings on this planet, and the planet itself. So when human beings really started roaming around, and I believe that we started in Africa and then we spread out, we were global citizens then. But when we started to settle down about 5,000 years ago and became farmers, then territorialism started. And we then started to think in groups and nationalities. And today I'm deeply concerned because of even more polarization of our views. And one's only got to glance at the news and newspapers and politics to see that there is this pull away from global citizenship to a fundamental belief in crude nationalism. And if we are going to save the planet, and I spoke at the United Nations, as you said, about this, if we're going to really deliver the 17 sustainable goals of the United Nations, then the only way to do it is by us looking about what is common between us. And there is more common than not common. But unfortunately, human beings allow themselves to be manipulated and drawn into a political arena, which is very dangerous. If you look at the history of humankind, you can see how these waves happen. In the 1930s, we could see that because of economics, it allowed certain rulers to take control, and then we had war. And I fear that unless people like you and others who are really passionate about the role of global citizenship, unless we reassert that, then I could be gloomy. But as an optimist, I am not gloomy. Now, my key mission is values-based education. I can say a little bit more about why that is later, but I see it as the key to helping children understand that not only should they be proud and rightly proud of the country they're born into, but they have a link to all people. And studying values helps you to understand that at a very deep level. So that's what I think global citizenship is, and I think that's what makes values-based education so crucial to that work.
Absolutely. And within this discussion on values-based education, you advance and develop the idea of ethical intelligence. So the question is, first of all, what is ethical intelligence? And in what ways do you believe fostering ethical intelligence contributes to fostering global citizens?
Yes. Emiliano, I have to be very careful when I talk about ethical intelligence. There are lots of academics who become very concerned when we start to label intelligences in the human being. In the past, we've seen certain tests being constructed to look at intelligence. So when I talk about ethical intelligence, I'm putting it in inverted commas. So there's another term that I use, which sometimes I'm more comfortable with, and that is personal holistic competence. Personal holistic competence is the ability to deal with complexity in life. Now, what we need human beings to be able to do is deal with increasing complexity. When I look back on my life, 30 years ago, I think seemed quite simple compared with what people have to face now. So personal holistic competence is an outcome of the values-based education that I talk about. But going back to ethical intelligence, very simply put, is the ability to ethically, morally, if you want, ethically self-regulate your own behavior in a moral way. And I've argued that, can you imagine a world, Emiliano, if our leaders of the world acted from that base of ethical intelligence? We would have a different sort of politics. As I'm speaking, there's in the United Kingdom, there's an election going on, and I be careful what I say. But when I've listened to the politicians on all sides, and I'm not a party politician, I'm not into politics, but when I listen to them, they do not talk as wise people. They're not looking for the wisdom of humanity. They're looking to score points on each other, to say that they'll be better as leaders than someone else. But I'm arguing that we need consensus. We need a global citizenship that's really trying to solve these huge problems that we can only solve together. Pollution affects you in Japan as well as me in New Zealand at the moment. We can't say because we're in one place it won't affect us. Climate changes in the world affect us all. Biodegradation and so on. So values-based education, its end product, the outcome of values-based education is the ability to think ethically, to hold up a mirror to yourselves, to say, what are my biases? How am I seeing the world? Can I see the world without bias? And the values that I take with me into the world help me to do that. And perhaps I'll explain a little bit more in a minute about how that happens. So ethical intelligence a friend of mine from Romania is just going to Harvard, and he's looking at how he can help me develop that term more. I'm not satisfied myself with that term, but I think it's a key to helping people to think about how they're using their brain in an ethical way. How are we relating to other people? How are we relating to ourselves?
And everything starts from our inner self in a way, because once we transform our inner self in a way that is contributing to the common good, then we help others to do the same. So, but in order to have this mind, develop this mindset, we need also pedagogy and a curriculum that encourages our future leaders, young individuals, to do so. And I want to ask you, I think this ties nicely with my next question. So you have published two interesting books. One is The Inner Curriculum, How to Develop Wellbeing, Resilience, and Self-Leadership. And then the other book, help me with the title, is
From My Heart.
From My Heart, exactly,
From my heart. Transforming lives through values.
Exactly. And both, in a way, offer excellent examples of values-based approach to pedagogy, but also concept of compassion, peaceful future for humanity. So I like to focus on the inner curriculum, but if you want to also mention the key themes of From My Heart, that will be great, I believe, and very interesting to our audience.
Yes, the audience, it's great to be with you today. I'm sorry I can't see you in person, but I can feel your energy. I think it may be helpful if I just explain a little bit of the history of how I got into this. In the British education system, I was a teacher, and then I quickly was promoted into positions of authority. I was a chief advisor for many, many schools. I was a chief officer in the British system, which gave me huge opportunities to see schools, many schools, to visit parts of the world. So I had a very broad view of childhood. And what I was noticing, that increasingly children were not being inducted into what I call an ethical vocabulary. They were not being inducted and hearing about words such as respect, tolerance, empathy, compassion. These words didn't seem to be in their vocabulary anymore. So I wondered, I thought, could educators do something about this? And so I decided to resign a high-powered job, and I returned to be the principal of a school in Oxford, in the UK. And I conducted an experiment over 7 years, and I teamed up with Oxford University, and we looked to see if you introduced children to values words, what would be the outcome? And so we went to the community and said, what values do you think are important for your children to learn about? They came up with a list of 22 values that they thought were important.
For example?
And so, respect, tolerance. It's interesting. I've done the work with many, many groups around the world. And it's interesting what values come up as very important values. In the United Kingdom, respect comes up as number one. If I talk in Africa, Africans think freedom is the number one. I've worked in other parts of the world where, there was one particular place where they thought competition was really important. I had to do a lot of talking on that evening.
More neoliberal value in this case, competition. But it depends. If it's a humanitarian competition, it's
yes,
also good.
Competition of the self is
Exactly.
I've been in competition with myself all my life. So interesting. So what we found at the school when the children were introduced to this, and we had a curriculum that wasn't just talking at the children, it was giving them experiential learning, so they would experience the values. So a simple example, a child learning about trust. Perhaps they'd have an obstacle course, and one child would have a blindfold on and another child lead the person over the obstacle course so that they would begin to understand trust. Very simple for very young children. So, cutting the story short, we introduced another thing besides the ethical vocabulary, and that was reflective practice. It's now known worldwide as mindfulness, but we introduced the children to being able to sit still, to be able to go internal so that they could really be and think, and then that thinking would guide their behavior during the day. This astounded me. My friends who are cognitive neuroscientists said I was 40 years in front of everybody by introducing children to this. In the East, of course, I often go into schools that naturally will sit still. But in the West, this hasn't been a common feature of schools. So this is what we did. So what were the outcomes, Emiliano? Number one, the biggest effect initially was on the adults. The adults found that their relationships with the students improved. They noticed that the relationships between students and students improved. They said to me, Neil, it is much easier to teach now. We can concentrate on the curriculum and not on behavior management. Second thing was the children's behavior. The children, because they understood these words, behaved as though they should. The adults modeled the values to the children. They were the models. So, and being a values-based school, Emiliano, is not easy because it means we as adults have really to think about what we are saying, what we are doing. So the third thing was that the community really loved values-based education. The parents said, we can see changes in our students. So, and the last thing was academic diligence. Academic diligence means that the children concentrated more on their academic and social studies. So the outcome academically was much better. So it's a win-win. On one hand, you get better academic results. On the other hand, character is developed. And as I say, that character then leads to that. Now, you asked me about the inner curriculum. Schools worldwide have a curriculum. As you know, a curriculum means everything that a school does. And it also includes the informal curriculum, which the school doesn't intend, but it happens. But underneath that, I think there should be another curriculum. So I'm arguing worldwide that we should have an inner curriculum. The inner curriculum is about our internal thoughts, feelings, emotions, and how we come alongside those and be in control. And so the key points of the book, the inner curriculum, are as follows. Number one, we need to help children to think about their internal worlds. Be curious. Why? Why do I behave in the way that I do? Why do I get angry? What's going on in me? So to make them curious about that internal world. Secondly, to help them explore that internal world, they need to understand their brains. What's here? What's the architecture that's happening in here? Because everything that we construct comes from here. It's in here somewhere. So what is happening? So in my view, children need to learn about their limbic system, their emotional world. They need to understand that this thing at the front of their foreheads, the prefrontal cortex. That's their executive function. That was the last part of our brains laid down in evolution. Now, what happens with many of us, and I don't know, Emiliano, if it happens with you, but sometimes we lose control of our prefrontal cortex because the limbic system, which is deep down inside, that's where you find the amygdala, for instance, which is our fear center. So the prefrontal cortex loses connection with that. So we flip our lid, because as Professor Dan Siegel will brilliantly articulate. We need children to understand it, appropriate age and stage. So what you teach an 8-year-old, you will be expanding when they're 16. So that I'm married to a wonderful person called Jane, and Jane is a psychotherapist. She's well known worldwide, and she has talked with me endlessly about the need for educators to understand, not be therapists as such, although there are elements of teaching that is therapy,
I agree.
but to really understand. For instance, I have a friend in the States, Dr. Dick Schwartz, and Dick has brought to the world a wonderful gift. It's called the internal family systems theory of psychotherapy. And I've used his work in helping schools help children to understand their internal world. We're all multi-personality. When I look at you, I'm wondering, who am I really talking to today? Am I talking to Emiliano, the parent? Am I talking to the professor? Am I talking to the man who may be walking down the street having an ice cream? Because we are multi-personality. And what Dick Schwartz's work has helped us to understand, which others have done in the past as well, is that we have parts of our personality which can be dominant. I have a very strong professional part that's probably showing now. But I hope underneath that, people can feel what I call my self-energy. Self-energy is your authentic self. And what thinking about your authentic self means is that you can realize that the parts that you play in life are merely parts. And underneath that is this wonderful energy. And Emiliano, I think if people really understand these sort of concepts, they would then realize all the great sense that you talk about in global citizenship. Because once you go into that internal world and realize that yourself, it's as Einstein and others said, you feel you are part of the universe, that the person next to you is actually you, because you're connecting to that wonderful essence of human beings, which Dick calls self, religion's called soul. We can put names to this, but the inner curriculum enables you to begin the journey of life, discovering this wonderful entity. And finally, I would say that what we're trying to do through all this work, values-based education, the inner curriculum, is to raise the level of consciousness on this planet. It's there. If we don't raise our consciousness, I mean awareness, being aware, being much more empathetic, having emotional intelligence, ethical intelligence, just raising our awareness so that I can really engage with you as another human being, and the audience today listening, engage with you as people, and you able to talk and be with each other.
Absolutely.
That's how we break down differences and polarization.
And just before this video interview, we were discussing the importance of human-to-human connections and the importance of a dialogic approach to all the discussions on developing critical consciousness, pedagogy. But there is an extra challenge, and it's the one that we all face, is the actual implementation, agency action in society, because it's always interesting and engaging to theorize about the importance of the inner curriculum, values-based education, global citizenship education, but then it comes a time where we need to start translating such important discussions into reality. And then you are the founder of the IVET Foundation, a registered charity that promotes ethical living and ethical leadership in the world. And particularly, the foundation works with businesses and all sectors of society to embed enhancing values such as respect, altruism, social justice, integrity, compassion in every aspect of social life. So my question is, could you share a couple of examples of initiatives or projects undertaken at the IVET Foundation that promote sustainability and global citizenship, and in relation to our discussion on values-based education and the inner curriculum?
Certainly. I founded the IVET Foundation, the International Values Education Trust, in 1995. Its main purpose was to develop values-based education, VBE as we know it, in schools throughout the world, based on the work I did in Oxford. So that was its main initiative, and that remains its main initiative. As the years have gone by, we've spread our thinking to what I call values-based living. How can we encourage all people in companies, businesses, parents, adults generally, politicians? How can we really foster values-based living, and the subset of that, which I call values-based leadership or ethical leadership? What can we do? So the IVET Foundation brings together people from all walks of life. We have university professors, we have hairdressers, we have people from education, we have people from pharmaceutical companies, a whole range of people who have agreed with IVET's Charter of Values. They are people that are living universal positive human values, as we've talked about in this interview. And they have agreed to live those lives and affiliate with each other. So it's almost, I daren't say this, but in some ways it reminds me of a bit of a LinkedIn, but it's not LinkedIn at all. So I don't want to give that impression, but it gives people connection. And I worried for years that there are so many people in the world doing wonderful things, but they do it in isolation. They're not doing it together, and therefore their impact is not great enough. So I'm hoping that the IVET Foundation will gradually, like a rolling stone, gather more moss, or a snowball gathering more snow. And we will reach a tipping point so that the influence of the affiliates of the IVET Foundation will actually influence at all levels in society what is actually transpiring. So in one way, it's got projects, obviously, but in another way, it's a form of connection. Specifically, we help people. Yesterday, I was teaching online a school in Cambodia that wanted to become a values-based school. So that was a fascinating day. I have schools such as Steve's School in Kenya. And Steve I met in 2013, and he went on to found a school, and he's founded it on his own money. As a teacher, he decided to put money into a rural school where the government wouldn't build a school. And this he built what we would see a very simple building, and the IVET Foundation has helped him by supporting him both a little bit financially, but also by giving encouragement and all that. We do things like there's another school in Africa last week that I wrote an article for their magazine talking about IVET and inspiring their students to become ethical leaders. There are many people doing all sorts of things, but that's a couple of examples. But the main thing is, I do believe if you're going to have your global citizenship, we need connection.
Absolutely.
And I always say to teachers, the number one skill of a teacher is the ability to connect with another human being. If you can't do that, I've seen teachers who have lots of knowledge, they may know mathematics, science, but they cannot connect to another human being.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely. And on the importance of connecting to other human beings, I want to ask you a last question, and the question is a challenging one. How would you define global citizenship education in 3 key words, and why these 3 key words? I know it's a challenging one, but it's also a very interesting one.
I think this is a brilliant question. I really do. Just off the top of my head, can I put in a fourth? Is that allowed in this interview?
Absolutely.
Have to keep it?
Yes.
Because 3 was challenging, I think. Number 1 is love. Love. And if you ask me why, I went into a primary school and the children were sorting values. They had cards with the names of values on, and they were sorting them. And the teacher had said, put them into an order that you're of importance. So this group of children, I went to look at what they had done. And what they had done, they'd put in a circle values such as respect, tolerance, empathy, responsibility, justice, all around the circle. But there was a word in the middle of the circle, and that word was love.
Love.
And I said to the girl, why have you put love in the center? And she said, Dr. Hawkes, and she paused. She said, if you don't have love, you cannot have any of the other values. And I thought, wow, out of the mouths of children can come great wisdom. Secondly, peace. I believe our natural state as human beings is peace. Most people don't realize it, but if you go internal into yourself, you will find that peace, that peaceful center of yourself. And I believe if we help human beings to find that center of peace again, then we would have peace throughout the world. Because you said earlier, I think you said something like, if we are peaceful inside, then we show that into the world, and the world will be peaceful. The reason why we have so much distress in the world is because human beings do not realize they're peaceful. They think they're other things. So peace is very important. The third one is hope. Hope. The last, of course, the last thing that was in Pandora's box was hope that she didn't let out into the world. Academics have argued about that story. But I think hope is important because hope, for me, a lot of my background work has been about finding meaning and purpose in your lives. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. How do we find a meaning and purpose for our lives? So hope helps you to have meaning and purpose. It says, okay, the world's in a mess, but what can you and I do about it? How can we help in a practical way, in a very simple way? The next person we meet, or you meet, audience, today, the next person, how will you interact with that person? That's the key. if you're going to have hope. The last one, I said I wanted to give you a fourth. The last one is courage. Courage. Because we have to be courageous. And what I tell schools around the world is to develop courageous advocacy in children. Get them to write to politicians. Get them to want to find out what's happening in their community. When something needs to be done in the community, make them advocates, but they've got to be courageous. Aristotle said that courage is the medium. If you have too much courage, you're then someone who you can't trust because you're all over the place. If you don't have enough courage, then you are a coward. So having courage is important so that you will go out into the world. And let us all be global citizens. Let's work from the mindset of each of us, no matter what country we come from, what language we speak, what religion we adhere to. Let us all join together, because this planet is a beautiful place. And I want to see it flourishing, not only for me, but for my grandchildren and their grandchildren.
Absolutely, with love, peace, hope, and courage. So thank you very much, Neil Oakes. Great discussion, dialogue, I should say, on your interesting work on values-based education, the work you're doing with the IVET Foundation, your books, The Inner Curriculum and From the Heart, and your wonderful humanity and heart that really comes up on the interesting concept and themes that you are sharing here with us, the Global Citizenship Education Interview Series. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.